There's a certain level of fear that the system needs to keep inside of people to keep them participating in a certain type of way. So when people get too nervous, they gotta offload it in some way. So that's what the entertainment experience is about in a lot of instances, the consumerism
Remember the
experience.
artist once known as Mos Def? He straight vanished from American soil, switched up his name, and lived in a whole different country, one that eventually hit him with a 5-year ban. By 2016, Yasiin Bey was standing inside a South African jail cell, arrested for trying to leave with a passport barely anybody had ever heard of. He was suddenly facing deportation from the one place that still let him perform, and the whole thing felt unreal. It all started at Cape Town International Airport in
The government of South Africa, in their constitution, has it clearly written that that means no one is excluded, is prohibited from leaving the country.
Hollywood hadn't just blacklisted him. They'd watched as immigration authorities on 2 continents turned him into a man without a country.
But the bottom line is that I was no threat. And I feel that I was made or they tried to make me a public example to discourage people from entering.
January 2016, a border official studied the document in his hands and couldn't make sense of it. Bey had been living in South Africa for about 3 years with his family and was finally trying to go, but the passport he handed over wasn't American, and it wasn't South African. It was a world passport issued by an organization called the World Service Authority. The official had never seen anything like it. He called his supervisor, the supervisor called security, and within 20 minutes, Yasiin Bey was under arrest. The charges were heavy. They accused him of using fraudulent travel documents, trying to mislead immigration officials, and breaking the rules of his stay in South Africa. Officers walked him away from the terminal while his family stood there watching. The same artist who came to Cape Town to escape American industry pressure was now facing criminal trouble in a whole different country. The irony hit hard. South Africa's Home Affairs Department dropped a statement within hours, saying the world passport wasn't recognized as legit travel ID. They said Bey entered the country on a visitor permit that had expired a long.
The Brooklyn-born rapper, once known as Mos Def, now known as Yasiin Bey, was arrested for a fake passport in Africa on Thursday, January 14th.
Long time ago. They said his family overstayed too, maybe by months or even years. Officials started looking into whether they should hit him with immigration fraud charges on top of everything else. The media swarmed the situation instantly, turning a simple airport detention into worldwide news. From custody, Bey recorded an audio message, and you could hear the exhaustion in his voice. He said he didn't lie about anything. The world passport wasn't a trick. It was tied to his belief that humanity shouldn't be boxed in by borders. He had used that same.
There's no threat. And I feel that I was made or they tried to make me a public example to discourage people from entering.
Document before without problems. Now South Africa was treating him like he was some mastermind criminal, threatening to deport his whole family, putting him under state watch for reasons he couldn't understand. Then came the shocker. He announced he was retiring from music and film, effective immediately. One last album would drop that year, and then he was done with the entertainment world as it existed. His retirement wasn't just because of South Africa. It was everything. Every border, every gatekeeper, every system that tried to lock him in. The arrest was just the moment that proved nothing was safe, not even exile. But the trouble didn't begin in
A certain level of fear that the system needs to keep inside of people to keep them participating in a certain.
South Africa. The real mess started 2 years earlier, in 2014, when Yasiin tried to fly back to the US for a tour. By then, he'd been moving around different countries, Central America, Europe, trying to find a place that didn't feel as suffocating as Hollywood. The tour was meant to be his return home, a chance to reconnect with fans who'd rocked with him since the Black Star era. But he never got past immigration. Officials pulled him aside and said there were issues with his paperwork. They didn't explain anything clearly. They said there were legal matters, procedures, concerns, but nothing specific. His entire
done there. But the bottom line is that I was no threat.
Tour collapsed. Promoters had to refund tickets. Venues that sold out weeks earlier just sat empty on show nights. Yasiin Bey was stuck outside the country he was born in, with no straight answer as to why. To him, it felt intentional. His activism had been getting louder and louder for years. that 2013 Guantanamo force-feeding demonstration had government officials upset. His comments about foreign policy, police violence, and systemic injustice weren't exactly welcomed by federal powers. So when immigration suddenly had problems with his entry, the timing felt too
Yasiin Bey, and I'm here today to demonstrate the standard operating procedure.
too perfect to ignore. They couldn't punish him for speaking out, but they could punish him with paperwork. That's when South Africa came into the picture. The country had a long history of taking in political exiles, especially during apartheid. Artists went there to escape oppression in other places. After apartheid ended, South Africa presented itself as open, progressive, and welcoming, a place where an artist could just breathe. So in late 2013, Yasiin moved his whole family there, put his kids in Cape Town schools, tried to live a simple, normal life. And for a while, it actually worked. He performed at smaller venues without pressure from big labels. He made music without executives watching his every move. He lived as Yasiin instead of constantly acting like Mos Def for the world. But the visitor permit he used to stay there wasn't permanent. It needed extensions, explanations, proof. South African officials wanted to know why he was there, what he was escaping, and how long he planned to stay. And honestly, none of those answers fit neatly on immigration forms. When the permit expired and officials refused extensions, that's when he made the decision that would lock him into the situation completely. The World Service Authority had been issuing world passports since the 1950s, based on the belief that national borders were unnecessary walls dividing humanity. Their passports symbolized global citizenship, the idea that everyone deserves the right to travel freely, no matter where they were born. Some countries accepted it, most didn't, and South Africa definitely didn't. But Yasiin believed in the message behind the document more than he believed in the traditional system that had caused so much pain worldwide. He had used the world passport in other places before. Some officials honored it, others overlooked it. To him, it wasn't illegal. It was resistance. So when his South African permit expired and he couldn't get an extension, he chose the world passport as his exit plan. He arrived as an American citizen, but he was determined to leave as a global citizen who didn't answer to one single government. But the plan fell apart the second he handed the document over at the airport in January 2016. The border officials didn't see global philosophy. They saw a fake passport. They saw someone trying to break the rules. And the arrest happened fast. Bey tried explaining what the passport stood for, how it worked, how other countries had accepted it. But South African Home Affairs wasn't interested in the concept. They only cared about enforcing their rules. The moment the news broke, the story spread everywhere. Major outlets covered it. Hip-hop sites turned it into a storm. Some fans defended him, saying he was standing up against unfair border systems. Critics said he was an American star acting like the rules didn't apply. But nobody really understood the full story. For Yasiin, it wasn't about a passport. It was about years of trying to escape systems of control, only to find out those systems exist everywhere on the map. South Africa gave his family 14 days to leave the country, but that was only the start. They placed him on the undesirable persons list, banning him from coming back for 5 years. It wasn't just paperwork, it was punishment. They didn't like that he challenged their authority or questioned the legitimacy of their borders. The same country he believed would be his refuge turned around and pushed him out. By mid-2016, Yasiin Bey was learning what it truly meant to be stateless. South Africa banned him for 5 years. The United States denied him entry back in 2014. And Europe began shutting down his shows because he couldn't secure travel documents. Promoters in London waited for a confirmation that never came. Berlin venues canceled after weeks of silence. Amsterdam shut down plans before tickets even dropped. The man who stood against borders was suddenly trapped by them from every direction. But the border crisis didn't begin the exile. It sealed it. The real push started years before, back when he was still performing as Mos Def and Hollywood began seeing him as too risky. The breaking point came in 2013 with a video that would make him untouchable to big studios. He sat in a chair and let medical professionals force a feeding tube down his throat for the world to see. The Guantanamo force-feeding video exploded across the internet the moment it dropped. Human rights groups had been talking about the procedure for years, explaining how hunger-striking detainees were being force-fed twice a day. The UN called it torture, doctors called it cruel, but the reports didn't shake the system. People read the articles, felt sad for a second, and went right back to their lives until they actually saw it. The gagging, the choking, the way the body reacts when a tube gets pushed deeper, suddenly the whole thing became real in a way the public couldn't ignore. But the backlash hit just as fast. Critics said he was using detainees suffering for attention. Others claimed he was turning actual torture into performance art. Government officials said the video was anti-American propaganda. Even some of the same folks who had once lifted him up quietly stepped away as soon as things got controversial. Hollywood didn't need to blacklist him on paper. The video did all the work for them. After 2013, major film offers dried up completely. The blacklist was silent but absolute. And this wasn't the first time the industry decided he was too much. Back in 2006 at the MTV Video Music Awards, Bey had posted up outside with a megaphone performing his Hurricane Katrina response track while the red carpet rolled inside. Police shut him down mid-performance and charged him with disorderly conduct. Executives brushed it off as a desperate stunt, saying it showed he was unstable. From that night forward, the Whisper campaign started. Hard to work with, always causing trouble, and it never stopped. So by the time the force-feeding video dropped 7 years later, Hollywood already saw him as someone they wanted gone. They just needed a clean excuse, and the video became that excuse. But the real problems went deeper than any single incident. Everything truly started back in 1999 when he realized the industry was treating Mos Def like property, not a person. His debut album, Black on Both Sides, blew up. Critics praised it, fans loved it, and the underground crowned him as a voice of conscious rap. But while the public celebrated Yasiin, the industry only cared about Mos Def. In offices, managers stopped calling him Yasiin altogether. They only cared about the brand. They wanted Mos Def doing events Yasiin didn't care about, Mos Def endorsing products Yasiin didn't believe in, Mos Def performing non-stop while Yasiin just wanted to make art that mattered. His Black Star work with Talib Kweli made the cage tighter because now fans expected him to be perfectly political, perfectly conscious, perfectly pure every second of his career. That reputation turned into a trap. Every move he made got judged. Every collaboration got questioned. Every creative choice became a debate about authenticity. By the mid-2000s, Yasiin was living two lives. Mos Def was the public figure doing interviews and shows, while Yasiin was the private person barely hanging on to himself. The split grew wider and wider until he felt like he was fading inside his own brand. So in 2011, he finally announced he was done with the name. From that moment forward, he would be Yasiin Bey, but contracts still said Mos Def. Marketing still said Mos Def, and the industry insisted on owning that identity. Changing his name didn't change who controlled the brand. That's when he started planning his full escape, not just from Hollywood, but from the United States altogether. He needed space from the machine that had already swallowed Mos Def and was trying to swallow Yasiin next. And he wasn't the only one who saw what the system did to artists who refused to play along. Dave Chappelle had escaped to South Africa in 2005 for similar reasons. Cat Williams had sacrificed opportunities instead of letting the system twist him. Monique had been pushed out for simply demanding fair treatment. The pattern was right there. If you resisted the machine erased you. Yasiin knew what was coming. He just didn't know how far it would go. From South African detention in early 2016, he announced that his final album, December 99th, would release on December 9th through Tidal. 3 singles, Local Time, NA, and Seaside Panic Room, dropped ahead of the project. Fans waited for the full release with excitement, but when the date showed up, nothing appeared. No album, no explanation. December 99th simply vanished, which felt fitting for someone who had spent years slipping away from an industry determined to control him. And that wasn't the only missing project. Bey had spoken about 2 other completed albums, Negus and Natural Person, and the long-awaited Black Star follow-up with Talib Kweli, yet neither one surfaced. Ferrari Shepherd, Yasiin's collaborator, confirmed something fans had never expected. Both albums were fully recorded, fully mixed, and just sitting unreleased somewhere. Fans had been waiting for new Black Star music since 1998, so finding out a complete album existed but wouldn't be released felt like a punch to the chest. But the move wasn't about cruelty, it was about control. Once you understood Yasiin's battle with streaming services, the decision made perfect sense. These platforms paid artists fractions of pennies while keeping the bulk of the money for themselves. The system poured millions into tech companies and labels while musicians were left scrambling to survive. Bey saw streaming as the final form of exploitation. Art turned into data. Artists turned into content workers with no power and almost no pay. In 2019, he finally unveiled Negus at a special listening session in Hong Kong. The album had been recorded back in London in 2015, then hidden away for 4 years untouched by streaming or labels. Press releases announced that the project wouldn't drop on any platform. It would appear only as installations around the world where people could listen once in the room and nowhere else. No digital version, no physical version. No downloads, no streams. If you wanted to hear it, you had to show up in person. Industry insiders didn't understand the move at all because streaming dominated everything by then. But Bey wasn't chasing numbers. He was rejecting the entire system. If avoiding exploitation meant avoiding the platforms themselves, then that's exactly what he would do. His retirement was never about stopping art. He was stopping their access to his art. His music existed, just not inside the machine. Only people willing to respect his terms could experience it. The industry called it career suicide, but Bey saw it as survival. Then, in 2025, Yasiin Bey re-entered the music world with Forensics, produced alongside The Alchemist. 9 years after announcing retirement from a South African jail cell, 8 years after what the public thought was his last performance, he stepped back in, quiet but powerful. The project blended personal reflection with political sharpness, proving he never stopped paying attention even when the world couldn't hear him. His return didn't follow the usual playbook. No massive promo run, no streaming platform domination, no major label rollout. He didn't suddenly embrace the systems he spent years rejecting. Forensics existed exactly how he wanted, distributed through channels he trusted and controlled. And when you looked back at the years before, all the scattered features started making sense. Work with Kanye and Kid Cudi on Kids See Ghosts, verses with Black Thought, cameos with Freddie Gibbs and Madlib. He never stopped creating. He just refused to let the industry measure him by charts or streams. His mother, Sharon Smith, passed away in 2023, 2 years before the release of Forensics. She had been a guiding force in his career, helping him make every major decision and teaching him the values that made compromise impossible. After her passing, Bey had to sit with a heavy question: was the price of integrity worth everything he lost? At 51, banned from countries, pushed out of an industry that once praised him, and sitting in grief that cut deeper than any headline, he felt the weight of that question in a new way. But looking back, he understood something his mother always knew. Survival doesn't require surrender. Younger artists watching him saw proof that walking away from toxic deals was possible. They learned that fighting against exploitation wasn't a fantasy. It was a real path, even if it was harder and less profitable. The audience might be smaller, the payday might be uncertain, but the alternative was becoming a product instead of a person. And that was exactly what the industry tried to turn Mos Def into back in 1999. At 51, Yasiin Bey represented something almost extinct in modern entertainment, an artist who protected his soul by refusing to compromise. He lost money, opportunities, visas, and mainstream fame, but he kept his creative identity whole. The system tried to trademark his name, countries tried to push him out, and labels tried to shape him into something he wasn't. But the part of him that mattered most stayed untouched because it was never for sale in the first place.